fireworks going off all across the city. It is an extraordinary moment, of course, as we welcome in the next millennium. The Pope, of course, will be giving a short speech, not too long, after his blessing, basically wishing everybody a great year and a great new millennium.
I don't have to tell you what that is.
The church bells of Rome, Tom, are going off all across the city.
All right, Keith, we're hearing the church bells of Rome and watching the Eiffel Tower in Paris as this extraordinary intersection of celebrations occurs on the continent of Europe. When you think how this century is ending, given the fact that these three countries were at war with each other, France and Germany twice, Italy and Germany allied against France during World War II, and Berlin emerging from the darkness of the 20th century, the city of political freedom and sophistication. At the beginning of the 20th century, that was thought to be a monstrosity, the Eiffel Tower, now one of the most familiar and beloved landmarks in the world. Now back to the Holy Father in St. Peter's Square, the crowd beginning to hush some as he offers the papal blessing, both in person and on those large screens. Keith, what about the security there? Do those people have to go through magnetometers to get into St. Peter's Square?
Yes, they did. The security was very strict, Tom. In fact, a lot of people came to the square earlier to get a good vantage point, and at one point the Italian police cleared them all out of the square. Every person was moved and then brought back in single file. The Pope is now giving his blessing, Tom.
Sul quadrante della storia scocca un'ora importante. Inizia in questo momento l'anno 2000. L'anno che si introduce in un nuovo millennio. Per i credenti è l'anno del grande giubileo. Buon anno a tutti voi.
The Holy Father is 79 years old, and in his Millennium message he said, looking back, we should give thanks but also ask for forgiveness.
Di ogni parte della terra, nel varcare la soglia del nuovo anno, mi piacerebbe bussare alla porta delle vostre case per recare a ciascuno il mio augurio cordiale. Buon anno a tutti nella luce che da Betlemme si irradia sull'intero
Yes, Tom.
universo.
The Pope is not able to move around as easily as he once did, obviously, but he does have some travel planned for the Middle East and other places. Is there any talk in the Vatican, whispered conversations about when succession may come?
There is not actually. They're very hushed about it. It's the sort of thing the Pope serves until death. It is a lifelong job. And so they're very concerned here about his health. Clearly, he is in failing health. At the same point, it's the sort of subject that isn't broached in public. It's just not the done thing in the Vatican. So there is talk, of course, quietly within the Vatican halls about that there will be a succession in this new millennium, but it's not the kind of subject they like to talk about publicly. But I think particularly, Tom, because he's not in particularly good health.
All right, now let's go to Paris and Donna Friesen from NBC News, who's in the middle of it all. Donna, tell us exactly where you are.
I am right on the Champs-Élysées, overlooking this amazing avenue, which isn't as well lit up right at this moment as it was moments ago and will be. After the spectacular show of lights on the Eiffel Tower is over, it really was, at the stroke of midnight, absolutely amazing. So much light that it looked as if the tower was sparkling and at one point made of gold, just shimmering incredibly. Amazing when you consider that the Eiffel Tower was a structure that was originally built, meant to be temporary when it was built in the late 1800s. Now, of course, as you said, Tom, a landmark for Paris. What's going to take place now is along the mile of the Champs-Élysées between the Arc de Triomphe behind me and the Louvre are a number of Ferris wheels that have been built, not the kinds of Ferris wheels that you would ride on, but Ferris wheels designed by artists and architects, choreographers, dancers, musicians, each one of them very different. Each one of them will begin to turn. It's meant to symbolize France moving into the next century. Important to note, though, that while this is all going on in Paris, there are about 500,000 people in France tonight who have no power, no water, no phones because of the fierce storms that rage through here. So Paris, though, is certainly celebrating. Tom?
Thank you very much. The Parisians, the French with their exceptional matchless sense of style. And now to Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, a place that has seen so much during the 20th century. It was from there that Adolf Hitler promised the Third Reich would last for 1,000 years. Thank God it came to a close in 1945 with so much pain, so much death, such a deep and ugly scar in history. But now these German citizens united again after being divided by communism, looking forward to a new time, a new generation of Germans. For them, it is ancient history. We'll have continuing coverage throughout the evening from here at 2 Times Square, the Renaissance Hotel in New York, on this NBC station. And good evening. You're looking live at Times Square in New York, where a massive crowd has been gathered since early this morning, waiting patiently for the stroke of midnight, now less than 6 hours away, signaling the dawn of a new year, a new century, a new millennium in the United States. The traditional ball, this year made of Waterford crystal, will drop at the stroke of midnight, and the celebration will begin here as it has been going on all day around the world, celebrations of beauty and hope. New Year's Eve, 1999, the dawn of the first morning of a new millennium beginning in the Pacific. In more than 120 countries around the world, it is already the new year 2000. In Moscow, surprising news from the Kremlin: Boris Yeltsin resigns as president. And end of the millennium jitters, computers, national security, banking and health. At this moment, all is well. And here in New York, Times Square, the final countdown to midnight, 8,000 police officers among the crowd of an expected 2 million.
This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting live from Times Square.
Good evening. In more than half the world tonight, it is a new day, a new century, the beginning of a new millennium. And so far, it has been a joyful, peaceful, and largely trouble-free transition as time now sweeps toward the eastern shores of North America. It began early this morning in the Pacific in large ways and small. Sydney, Australia, showing why it is one of the cities of the future. Hong Kong, now a part of China, but a city with its own distinctive identity, combining the modern and the traditional. Bangkok, Thailand, where the ancient past and present and future came together in a pageant of dragon dancers and delicate beauty. Moscow, the Russians gathering outside the fortress of the Kremlin to ponder a new century and a new president with the resignation of Boris Yeltsin. Rome, the eternal city, St. Peter's Square, where Pope John Paul, frail at 79, but the Holy Father had praise and admonitions for the faithful. And back here in Times Square in New York, the granddaddy of America's New Year celebrations, where more than 500,000 people gathered early this morning, and they have been filling this square all day long. We expect the crowd could be as large as 2 million by the time midnight arrives. It's worth reminding